For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for more updates.
Did you know that Goldman Sachs has forecast that India will be the world's second largest economy by 2075? Did you know that by 2030, India's working age population will be a staggering 1.04 billion, which is almost thrice the population of the United States? Hello and welcome to another edition of Capital Calculus. I am your host Anil Padmanabhan. A few weeks ago, the Harvard Business Review, or HBR, published a paper with a provocative headline. It asked the question, is India the world's next big economic power? In fact, to seed the idea, the authors used a very interesting moniker, Incredible India. According to them, there is a happy convergence of circumstances, including the ongoing geopolitical reset that will make this possible. To explore this further, we spoke to the lead author, Bhaskar Chakravorti. He is the Dean of the School of Business at Fletcher University, Tufts. I began by asking Bhaskar as to how and why they coined this very interesting moniker, India Inevitable.
I think the question of India's inevitability has been around for a while. There's been plenty of discussion for a few decades now about India being a rising economic power and eventually a rising global political power. What I've been struck by in recent months is the almost a chorus of voices that one hears, not just from within India, but across the world, from a number of different analysts, whether you're looking at people in the investment industry or in the global consulting businesses, and just speaking with companies and senior management of companies, in addition to several policymakers, both from within India and abroad, sort of talking about the rise of India as being something that has now sort of gathered momentum. So I was particularly struck by a growing sense of consensus that this is finally happening, and wanted to investigate why and what is different this time relative to a few times in the past when similar voices and similar noises had been made about India's inevitable rise.
So, Bhaskar, you're so correct. India has flattered in the past, but ended up disappointing everyone, including itself. So why do you believe that this time it's different?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I'm not sure I will have the most crisp response to it. I think there are several aspects of the India story this time, which are familiar, and perhaps the kind of the core with which one begins is the promise of the Indian consumer. It is now, arguably the largest country in the world, and it's not just the largest country in the world; it is the country with perhaps the largest set of consumer needs that are unmet. And with this massive base of potential domestic consumption, there is, clearly a need for responding to this, this hungry consumer. And when I say consumer, it's consumption not just in the home, but consumption in enterprise settings as well, which are also largely unmet. So there is this enormous potential, and we are also seeing post-pandemic, a potential increase in real wages, which drives purchasing power. So you combine these elements, and you are beginning to see several industries, continuing to take off, and all of that sort of puts some wind behind the back of the Indian economy. So that's kind of one important element on the demand side. The corresponding element on the supply side is that the same very large population, translates into a young working age labor force, which is eager to get to work. And both of these elements, a big consumer market at home and a young labor force ready to work, are rarities in the world. Because if you look around the world today, if you look at the OECD countries, the developed nations, whether they're in the West or countries such as Japan and South Korea, we're looking at domestic consumption flattening, and we are also looking at a demographic that is aging, and you are ending up with many of these countries struggling to fill jobs that they're essentially turning to immigration where they can, and many countries don't even have good immigration policies to fill the gaps. And so I do believe that India, in many ways, sort of stands out with these two as being the key drivers. Now, both the points I made here are they've been around for a while, so there's nothing new about these two. However, what is new is that there are several other factors that have now sort of come together. One significant factor is the re-examining and the reckoning of the global economy with the role of China. And as we look at a post-pandemic China, a Chinese economy slowing down, a potential a rift between China and the West, particularly with the United States, there is a clear desire for international players to look for alternatives to China, whether this alternative involves foreign investment looking for a home, or alternatives in terms of countries and regions that can help plug gaps in the supply chains, or look for alternatives to the Chinese footprint on the supply chain. So this gives India an opportunity to help fill the gap, because in many ways, if you are looking for a big economy and as an alternative to China, it is India. And I'll make one more point, which is also relatively new in this equation, which is the advancement of the digital infrastructure in India, which provides an element of acceleration on many fronts, in particular an acceleration on the informal economy of India, which requires the ability to seamlessly exchange goods and services and get paid. And a large part of that is made much more seamless and feasible.
I quizzed Bhaskar on India's rapidly growing digital public infrastructure. It's curious to know whether it was giving an extra and welcome boost to the Indian economy.
Absolutely, no question about it. And one of the challenging aspects of the Indian economy, the Indian labor force, is that 86% of them, maybe even more, are engaged in informal work, informal services, and the informal sector. And a big part of what potentially holds back access to the ability to participate in the market and also be more productive is how do you get paid? And the fact that digital payments has essentially skyrocketed in India, really accelerates that process. That said, I do wish and I hope that India does have a plan to diversify beyond this enormous dependence on the informal sector and develops its quote-unquote formal sector in a more formal way. And the most obvious direction for that formal sector needs to be a growth in the manufacturing area. And when I think about manufacturing, obviously, I do not expect India to be becoming a manufacturing powerhouse like China, which spans many areas, but India to actually pick its spots in terms of manufacturing and grow along those vectors. So the digital network, the digital public infrastructure has been critical in enabling this informal sector, but to maintain momentum and to actually create jobs in a sustained manner, we need to look much beyond that.
See, just to me, a collateral gain that seems to emerge from all of this is the trust quotient, because when it's something which is sorely lacked in the Indian economy framework, but more and more when you engage online, or you, like the payments example you cited, All of these you pull together, eventually it starts improving the trust quotient, which is a key factor in any free market economy, right?
Absolutely. And I think the whole notion of digital trust itself is something that we are grappling with, not just in India, but across the global economy. In the old days, when you were, looking to transact with somebody, you would meet them face to face. If you wanted to go and buy a banana in a market, you could actually pick up the banana and smell it, and then, feel it, and then, take it with you and give some money in exchange. Now, with things being done digitally, the whole idea of digital trust itself, takes on much more, center stage, but it has many different facets to it. So when I think about the notion of digital trust, I want to understand whom am I dealing with on the other side of the transaction, because I can't actually see them. And that person could be on the other side of the country. They could also be on the other side of the planet. And then once I get my goods and services that as part of the transaction, the payment that needs to be made, and I want to ensure that that payment also gets to that person or that institution appropriately. So these are very, very important factors: authentication and confirmation of this bilateral exchange. But on top of that, there are many other aspects that contribute to digital trust. And this is where I think India still has some work to do. One important aspect of the digital trust equation is every time I engage on a digital platform, I'm generating data. And then the question is, what is happening to that data? How private is that information? How is it likely to be used, either by the party with whom I'm transacting or by the state that might have access to that information? And many of these questions are still a bit of an open issue.
Bhaskar's caution on data privacy is well placed. But there was another part of Bhaskar's co-authored paper which made me curious. This was about multinational companies operating in India. According to the authors, they will have to localize their content. In other words, what works in the rest of the world won't necessarily hold true in India.
Yeah, I think, when you talk about localizing content, there is a localization that is simply respectful of the price point that the Indian consumer is willing to pay and or has the ability to pay. And that price point typically would be significantly lower than the prices that you would pay for something close to that same product, whether the product is food in a fast food restaurant, or whether the product is subscription membership to a television streaming show, or whether the product is an automobile. We pay much less in India. So that's one part of it, is price. But price alone is not enough. So on top of the adaptation from a purchasing power perspective, there's also adaptation in terms of tastes and needs and the consumer context. So say in a fast food restaurant, when you walk into a McDonald's or a Pizza Hut, the menu that you are offered recognizes the fact that the Indian tastes are complex. You might have a younger generation that is looking to have the same experience as the same fast food restaurant that they might experience in Singapore or in Brussels or in New York. But then there are other generations of that same family who might be visiting the restaurant along with the younger generation that might want something quite different. So recognizing the usage context, the consumption context, and the differential needs across this, the multiple consumers who are part of that context is an important part of what the product providers have to think about. Now, to put that together requires empathy and an understanding of the consumer, their tastes, and the complexity of the consumer and the complexity of the context, and then being able to innovate in not just the product design and presentation and selection, but also innovate in the activities and systems that go behind creating the product. Because ultimately, these companies, whether you're fast food or you're a car maker or you are offering a streaming show, you need to make money in order to sustain your business. So I do believe that there's a lot of innovation that has been happening to make the product tailored to the Indian context and sustainable.
Given that India is well on its way to becoming a major economic power, I was curious to know whether it will also contribute to the global innovation lexicon. After all, its digital public goods network, which has been used to deliver public good at scale, has now been adopted by the G20 as the global template.
I do see such a trend emerging in the future. I think there is this a notion that innovations start in the West, and then there's sort of a trickle down effect, going to the developing world. I do see enormous potential for the developing world, to essentially become laboratories for a different form of innovation, where you present the innovator with a set of constraints, and those constraints forces you to kind of figure out, okay, what is absolutely needed to get the job done for the consumer, and if I can strip out everything else, can I bring the cost down, and can I actually create a product that delivers a delightful value proposition for the consumer, and does it at a price point, and I can actually get it to the consumer in a way that is respectful of their context. So the consumer may not be able to go to a shopping mall, they may not be able to go to a store. I might need to think about how to solve for the distribution problem. Now, being able to do that in highly constrained circumstances gives you the ability to be enormously flexible in terms of product design, in terms of pricing, and also forces you to be empathetic to the consumer needs and the consumer context. And this is a discipline that product developers and designers need to learn, no matter where they're operating, whether they are in the United States or in Singapore or Japan or in India, or in a country in sub-Saharan Africa. So I do believe that this discipline gives you the ability to innovate anywhere.
The chorus around India's global potential is growing and becoming louder. It is no longer incredible India. Instead, it is inevitable India. The big question is whether India can walk the talk. Will it once again flatter to disappoint? To a large extent, this will be determined by how the Indian electorate votes in the next general election that is due in 2024. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to StratNewsGlobal on YouTube. Hit the bell icon so that you don't miss any updates. And if you like this show, please hit the like button. And if you have any ideas, suggestions, please do write to us. I'm available on Twitter @Capital Calculus. I'll be back next week with another episode. Till then, stay safe.